Fala galera, beleza? Quem tá falando aqui é Marcelo, o famoso Tileco. Nós vamos ter hoje um convidado, uma convidada muito especial, Kelsey Moser. Tô aqui junto com a minha colega Yellow. E, pessoal, só para vocês ficarem sabendo, nossa convidada hoje não fala português, então eu vou começar novamente, só que em inglês. Hello guys, my name is Marcelo. I work with electronic sports since 2011. So I am here with Yellow, my co-host. Say something, Yellow.
Good night.
Good.
I work with esports since 2019, and that's
And
it.
our guest today is Kels Moser. She's a professional with almost like 10 years of experience in esports. She has been working with different and various roles in esports since then. And she was like a head coach of law, coaching, it was like part of coaching staffs in Evil Geniuses. She was academic director and head coach at 100 Chiefs. And she was a broadcast producer for 1 second
The academy.
for Academy LCS. And the most important for me, because I participate in that program, she was educational development leader in Evil Genius Summit, Summit Evil Genius. Hi, Kelsey.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me on. Always nice to talk to audiences I wouldn't normally get to speak to. So appreciate the invite.
Uh, Kelsey, the first question we usually to ask is like, tell a little bit more about your history, how you started, how was your career and everything.
Yeah, so I'm a bit older than a lot of people who are in the esports scene. I didn't actually know that competitive gaming existed until I graduated university. You said 2011. That's when I graduated, so that tells you how old I am. Uh, but the So for me, the main interest was I started playing League of Legends, and I started to discover that there were a lot of people who played professionally. So it was way more interesting to me to watch teams competing at the highest level. I started writing freelance on the side and was eventually hired to a publication called The Score after many years to write full time, and that's kind of when my full time career started. The Effectively from that, I started talking to a lot of professional players, and they encouraged me to go into coaching. And then I spent some time. I coached in Europe very briefly, and then I went over to North America, where I was very passionate about improving the secondary scene or the development scene. And for me, that also means going deep into the educational path, because I think what really helps League of Legends succeed in at least my country, is basically deep high school pools, deep college pools, and then being interested in not just the competitive side, but also various other sides, which is why I was also a development lead for Evil Geniuses for a brief time and worked a lot on career education, things like that.
So Kelsey, I have this question for everybody that's here. But how did you get into the world of esports? Like you played video games
Yeah.
since childhood.
Yeah, I've played video games pretty much since I was very young, but mostly single player games. Um, I didn't start playing League of Legends again since I until I graduated university, and it was my first sort of esports competitive title. I played with a bunch of friends at the time, and I had one person I knew who was very interested in going pro. So I worked with her a lot on the side, and that's kind of how I started coaching, started really studying the game. So yeah.
Nice, nice. Because I don't know in US, but in Brazil, she asked because in Brazil, like it's part of the culture that
Hmm.
usually like 10 years before, uh, a woman didn't play games, so now
Yeah.
it's something that you are like improving about that. Uh, in the in your first job, how was that? Feel that you are working with something that I imagine that you are passionate, and what
Yep.
you did, like what was your like day to day, you know?
Yeah, so I don't know. Like my first unpaid job was doing like the match stickers for Gosu Gamers websites. They do like a lot of Dota, a
Uh,
lot of things like that. So
I use it
a
so
lot
much,
of
this
more.
website.
Yeah. So my first volunteer job was doing match stickers at the end of games. I would do, especially in the middle of the night. There weren't a lot of English speakers who wanted to do like the Chinese games, the um, Southeast Asian games, things like this. And then they started letting me write articles for their website. And that's when I used those submissions to apply to write articles at Riot Games, like their main LoL Esports website. They used to have articles there. Now they don't. But that used to be kind of a big thing. And I was the only person at the time who was writing or really talking in English about the Chinese league, the LPL. So that's sort of what my first thing that I was kind of known for was doing a lot of content around the Chinese League of Legends League uh, in English, and that kind of led me to my first full time job, which was for the Score in Canada, which is like a sports website, sports reporting app, and basically they kind of let me do whatever I want as long as I wrote articles for them. And then I used kind of the employment there to travel, so like to go to China, to go to Europe, to see and report on and interview and watch the games there. So that was very exciting for me. And then after that, it was after meeting and networking with all those players that I ended up getting into coaching, which was very different, but also like a very rewarding skill set just because you are kind of rewarded every day. You're interacting with people day to day. Whereas if you're a journalist, I don't know, it's a bit lonely sometimes, you know? So, yeah.
It's very nice to hear that because we always talk here how important is to volunteer yourself like in the games
Hmm.
community and do jobs like I don't I'm not being paid for this but I will
Yeah.
do it anyway, so very nice to hear. And what does a sport coach like or a
Mhm.
head coach, what how is it, how is it?
It's a lot of you go into the office very early in the morning. You kind of prepare the lesson or the information you want the team to practice that day. So a lot of times I will make PowerPoints or get clips from professional matches and watch the matches that took place in the middle of the night, things like that. And then I will prepare for the day and kind of talking to the players about what we're going to practice, what I want them to practice. And then during the games, we'll play however many games in the day, usually 5 to 6, depending on like what the schedule is at the moment. The LCS is known for changing the schedule a lot. So you give feedback based on the goal you chose and the lesson plan at the top of the day after every game. And then at the end of the day, you usually stay and talk to the players more. You kind of study more of the game, and then you go to bed very late at night. And usually do that 6 days a week. And then on match days, you'll come in early still. You'll have like draft and everything prepared. So which champions to pick, etc. Present it to the players. Go to the stadium. Go on stage and pick the draft for the players, and then the players will play the game. And that's sort of more or less kind of how, then you go home, you review the game, and then you do it again tomorrow, you know? So it is,
And
generally speaking, that.
this part is like how many hours? Like 8 hours, 9 hours?
Yeah, it's a lot. So I would be in the office like 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Oh
So
my God.
typically a lot. But
Uh,
yeah.
I
Like
can imagine. No, no, say, Ella.
no, I would say like
Mhm.
coaching is something that you were doing like practicing and learning while you're coaching. Uh,
Uh,
but
mhm. Go ahead.
I would ask like how do you learn how to coach actually?
A lot of so coaching in esports is in a very interesting position because you will get either someone very knowledgeable about the game who doesn't really understand like human interaction and element or how
Mm-hmm.
those things go, or you will get someone who doesn't understand the game at all and can kind of help the players get along, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think I started out as someone in the former, where I was pretty knowledgeable about the game. And
Mm,
over time, I realized that the second skill set is probably the most important. Just being able to like facilitate, guide the players, be very critical of like when they're giving themselves excuses, right, and not performing to their best. So I think that
mm,
those skills are things that I've worked very hard to develop over time. Um, and like keeping up with the game is very frustrating because of how much they change it, but you also have to do that, right?
mm.
So yeah, that's where most of the hours go, is just kind of studying the game constantly and resolving any conflicts that happen inside the team. Yeah.
I'm thinking like I don't know if you agree, but I think the hardest part for me it was like I started as a Dota player, and
Hmm.
after that I was a manager, and the part of like coaching and manager is something that you can do your job really well, and sometimes even doing your job really well, the team lo lose. So it was something that
Yeah.
really frustrated me sometimes. Like just for you know, in my first year, I wasn't really, how can I say, comfortable to even watch the game because I was like
Hmm.
all the time seeing like, hey, I know that when I left the team, the guys who played after me, they are really good. They are much better than me. But every time that something happens, I say like, I wouldn't do that.
Sure.
But it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
no,
I
say.
think that's more common for ex players, right? They get very
Yeah.
frustrated. It's like if only, if only I were playing, right? I wouldn't do this in my career. So it's a funny one because it does come up when you're watching backstage with your fellow coaches. They'll be like, "Oh, I can't believe, this guy. If just put me in, right? Just put me in. I'll be fine." These types of conversations do come up, but for me, it's mostly I tend to be very self critical and self reflective, and if something is going wrong, I still will say, okay, it is my fault. What can I do to improve the situation? I know a lot of coaches will feel like they have no control, but for me, if I ever feel that way, then I should probably not coach. That's how I feel. So I always try very hard to fix everything that I can. I don't always do great. Like I would say, um, some things I definitely drop the ball on every time, but when your job is so demanding, a lot of times you will drop the ball. You just have to try to refresh yourself and maximize the amount of time that you're focused and the amount of time that you can really um, succeed in these types of situations. So
Um, see, I heard that um, at least League of Legends has like a different types of coaching.
mm.
Like, how is that? Like, has the strategic coach, the assistant,
Oh,
like
sure.
how is that? What is that? What
I mean,
are the coachings?
those titles are kind of made up by Riot, but
Mm,
like in an ideal world, the head coach would be what you I would describe, who's someone who's very good at managing conflict in situations and
mm,
motivating the players and keeping everyone on task. And the strategic coach is someone who's like maybe just more studying the game, more talking to the players about the game. I think in reality, it's usually a mix of both. Like the one coach will be good at a certain thing, and one coach will be good at something else, right? And then they'll kind of sort of mix and match. Like, okay, this situation, I'm going to be better at handling this conflict. You're going to be better at studying top lane. I'll be better at studying bot lane. Like these types of mix and match in terms of skills is usually more what it comes out to. But that's sort of the way that Riot decided to name them, and it's kind of like whatever works is in reality is what we do. So yeah.
and seeing your LinkedIn, and you started kind of um as an analyst.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, and what's the difference of an analyst and a coach?
So on H2K, like most analysts tend to be way more data oriented and don't interact with the players as much. So you basically are studying the game and you're sending most of your information that you get to the coach. and then the coach will talk to you about like what they want to see, what sort of data they want pulled. And then you have to be very good at sort of presenting your findings because coaches are easily distracted and don't always read everything. Um, so you work on a lot of those things like charts, graphics, pulling data from solo queue to see like what enemy teams are playing, coming up with strategies and relaying them to the coach. Uh, I would say the difference between an analyst and the coach is the coach is way more hands-on with players and probably will spend less time kind of with data-driven skills or data science, like no less coding language, things like this. So yeah.
And you said something that I imagine that it was about like that, but when you are going to play against another team, you usually analyze like the solo kill from
Hmm.
the opponent. It's like to see
Yeah.
which character they are playing more for try to ban. It's like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So yeah, of course, you have to take as much information as you can get, like what they've played in pro, what they've played in scrims against you, what they've played in their solo queue games, what they've played in the past of their career, right? So you have to analyze all of these things and try to come up with what is most, and then of course like what's good on the patch currently, and come up with what they're most likely going to want to emphasize or focus on, or play like. So those are the that takes like there are a lot of data points in that, so it's very useful to have an analyst who's good with coding language, who can kind of manage large databases very well, and that's kind of more the direction that the analyst role has gone into. When I was doing it, it was a little bit more scrappy. I did a lot of data stuff manually, but my background was in like database management before I went into esports, so I did have some foundation there. So it was easier for me to kind of start from that point. And then also, since my game knowledge was the thing that was more praised about me, kind of start from that point and ramp up into, okay, I'm interacting with players more. This is the situation I'm in. I think because my jungle knowledge was so good, the reason why I started interacting with players is we had a player who is Cadril, who is now very famous if you're in the English language scene, and he wanted to switch from mid to jungle. So I ended up spending a lot of time talking to him, working with him on transitioning to jungle. Of course, his first jungle games on H2K were terrible, but he just went from that role in like the span of a week or 2 weeks. So uh, it was very difficult. And then he ended up going to another team and going from there. But because I had good feedback from Cadril, I was able to work with the other players as well. So yeah.
So we have our first question from the chat. So, what are the biggest challenge to train a team?
just for you know,
Uh,
1 second, and she's Tatiana. She has been talking to you in Discord. She say that
oh,
she loves
okay,
you.
yeah. Well, nice to see her. I know her as Nelly mostly, so yeah,
Yep.
nice to see her there. I mean, the biggest challenges really depend on what you're good at, right? So for me, being more introverted kind of person, I definitely de-stress most by spending time to myself and not talking to other people. It's definitely just building up the emotional stamina to spend like 12 hours a day with the same group of people who start to hate each other after time. So and being able to constantly be on and not let things slide, like they're being passive aggressive towards each other, you have to knock that out as soon as you see it. So those things are the most challenging for me. And in general, just stamina, right? So you have to make sure you're managing your time well so that you can be on all the time. I would say sometimes you get good long breaks in off season, but not always, because I would say that's where I do my best work is actually off season, because I'm a good talent scout, I would say. So I spend a lot of time watching players in off season and talking to players in off season to build the team for the next year. So you don't get that much break, so you have to kind of manage your time well and make sure you're taking rests when you can. Yeah.
I will change just a little bit about the subject, just because I think you are more interested in coaching, but just for giving a
Yeah.
little bit of introduction. You have been you worked as a production, right?
Yeah, I did.
Broadcast production. How was that? How was your like daily? How was another question? When you worked in a broadcasting, it was for esports too.
Yeah, yeah. So I worked. So I was hired as the Academy broadcast producer, which is the secondary league in North America. But they wanted me to also work on LCS sometimes, and so I did. There was one week where everyone went on, who usually works on the broadcast, went on sabbatical, and then we're on a retreat. And I ended up working closely with I ended up basically running the show, so that was fun. And then they also let me work on Worlds. I was able to produce for the quarterfinal between DK and Genji, so that was very fun. And then they let me help with the finals, which um, that broadcast won an Emmy, so I have an Emmy award credit technically, so that's very fun. But I mean, I'll take it. The but I really enjoyed it. I think it was some of the most fun I've had in my career. And it was basically like every day. The thing that I got the most praise or the most positive feedback for was my talent management skills, and that makes sense. I'm coming from coaching, but I really liked working with the on-air broadcasters, so the casters and the analysts, and giving them feedback on like what they can do better, telling them like, okay, we're going to focus on this area this week, and being very coachy about it. So that was one thing that I did a lot. I also really enjoyed it because I liked focusing more on the storytelling, because I would say, and this is interesting because I recently spoke to some people who are showrunners from CB Law, who ended up coming over and being head of like all of Americas for the production and operations and things like that. So I ended up having a lot of good conversations with them recently and talking about the difference between NA production and kind of the Brazilian production, and how their ideas aligned a lot with mine, which it should be, the broadcast should be more story driven, should be more about like the players, and their emotional journeys and what they do kind of in their downtime, what their personal lives are like, and giving viewers heroes to root for. Whereas I think in NA we have kind of focused too much on breaking down the game, talking about the how like their different champions are played, things like that. So I think they want to bring a lot more of that kind of focus to NA. So I found that very exciting because that's something that I really liked doing, working on my broadcast as well. So yeah.
I love that because
Hmm.
like being more human and more
Yes. Hmm.
less technical.
Hmm.
So we do have like every 2 weeks like to read the patch notes and be a
Yeah.
lot of technical, and okay, you go ranked and etc. But you don't actually see the human side of the players. So I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
But how was like your, I don't know, your job description for being a broadcast producer? Like, how
Yeah.
was your days? How it
Yeah.
was?
So there was like, for the main show that I worked on,
Mm,
which was the Academy and the Proving Grounds.
mm,
You would have like, basically I was sort of the creative director and the producer and the talent manager, the project manager, all of these things, because there was only one of me on the show. So I ended up, whereas the LCS or the main broadcast has like a talent manager and all of these roles individually, it was basically just me. So on days that we didn't have the broadcast, we would go to team houses or we would go see players, and we would do filming and like content for that was standalone or side content. And then so I would help direct that. I would also help edit that, and end up like working also with some of the editors that we contracted on explicitly how we wanted to do it. And then I would have to write the show. After I would run the story meetings. One day was basically story meeting day, where we sat and we discussed like how we wanted to run the show for three hours. Then we would also have a content meeting after, and then I would write up the show um, the night before the show, effectively. And if after one show day, we would have the show day next. So I would spend like several hours after writing the show for the next day. And if we wanted to add extra content bits, it was usually me doing them. So I would be doing the video editing or like some graphics. Um, in the moment, and then the show would run, and during the show I would take notes on what my talent was doing and give them feedback. And then at the end of the week, maybe we would have a day or two off, and then we would go back and we would start it all over again. So that was what it was like. It was very fun, I think, just because there was so much freedom kind of given to us to make the show what we wanted to make it. So I mean, we didn't have a lot of budget, but we did have a lot of trust in terms of people letting myself and the talent kind of make the show whatever we wanted to make it. So that was very fun.
It's like the freedom to put your hands to make everything. Talking a little
Yeah.
bit about the program that I participate, like the Some Evil Genius. How was that? How was participate that? I remember that it was like a lot of people, a lot of people participating in
Mhm.
terms of like teaching, and a lot of people like participating in terms like me, like a student. How was
But
that for
Sure,
you?
sure.
I might say that a lot of
Mhm.
people doesn't know about the program at all.
Yeah,
Like
Sure, sure, yeah.
I wouldn't know if it wasn't Marcelo.
Yeah, so basically there was an education division for UG, and the idea behind that was we would either do advisory work for universities who wanted to start programs, or we would like produce content and like sell tickets to classes for summits that were based on esports careers, or we would run like camps for high school kids who could kind of come and play, but also learn about the scene a bit more with a career focus. So that was an interesting one because I was basically given a small budget and an assistant, and then a certain like 4 months to make all of the programming for it. Um, and so that involved like reaching out and talking to individuals in the company who worked in different roles and seeing like if you wanted to do a lesson, what would this lesson contain, and then making the slides and the presentations and the interactive games and stuff for that. Um, and then coming up with the schedule and the registration websites and everything else. So we had to be very meticulous about planning it and making sure it got executed on time. And I think, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Marcello can tell you if it was a success or not, but I did have fun doing it. So yeah.
for me, it was like really amazing. I still have
Mhm.
like the drive with the classes, so I really like that.
Nice. So yeah, but we did that, and then while I was doing that, I was also helping with our prodigies and academy teams, so coaching on the side as well. I ended up doing a lot of like individual coaching with especially our top laners. So that was very because that's like the role that I probably know the most or understand the most. So ended up basically spending the most time with them and making sure I was meeting with them at least once or twice a week, and giving them feedback and helping them. So it was that was the development part. It was like the education development lead. So competitive. Oh no, it's competitive and education development lead was my full title. So I basically had a lot of fingers in uh, a lot of bowls, if you will. So yeah.
I don't actually see a lot of teams doing something like this, like a project,
Mhm.
educational project. You know,
Yeah.
um, and how how do you think this project helped the community, the sport community?
And let me
I mean,
complete the question. Do you know anyone who came from this project, like someone who started this
mhm.
project and now is
Mm,
working with esports?
So there are a couple of people from the summit who kind of kept in touch with me, and there was one person from the camp. They were very interested in casting, and now they're doing a lot of casting full time. They just did casting for the Game Changers tournament in LA, so that was very like fun for them. So like there were a few people who who I met through the program who I got to see kind of rise a bit, and then obviously I think Marcello was already a manager, but he kind of kept going for a bit, so that was good. But I think it's been fun to kind of keep mostly the people who are interested in competitive were the ones who kept in touch with me, just because of my background. But it was good to kind of meet people who are young and interested in getting their foot in the door, and then see kind of their progress. I hope that like those types of programs can continue to exist in the future. But for now, since esports teams are cutting budget so much, I don't expect to see them next year, or this year, I should say. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future to these types of programs.
Uh, just a question before. Uh, yes, I know that the companies from esports, like esports teams, they are cutting some budget. But don't you think that it's time, like for example, you have more education about that? For example,
Yeah.
when I did this summit, when I did this program in Evil Genius, I was part of the university team too, and I was one of the first to say for the coordinator, like, hey, put that esports subject. It's something that it's good in the future. In my like former university, now they have a
Hmm.
class with like esports and traditions, you know. It's
Yep.
not like time to people see like it's as a professional, because sometimes my mom knows how what I do, because I spend like a lot of time to
Yeah.
explain for her, but it's start to being like a subject in that university. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what is slowly happening is a lot of the programs that teams are starting are going to be. And this is obviously U.S. based because I don't know, like regions outside of the U.S. as well, in terms of how the educational sphere operates. But I think a lot of these programs are starting to be taken over by universities, more and more. So you'll get like the esports majors. It's very hit or miss, like how useful they are from talking to people who have enrolled in them. Because sometimes you will apply to jobs and then people will say, okay, you majored in esports. What does that qualify you to do exactly? So those types of things. Whereas I think I'm seeing a lot more people have success like majoring in something specific, and then you apply for an esports organization, and they say, "Oh, you majored in like project management or business admin or something like this." That translates directly to a position we have open, right?
Yeah,
So I think that those are more the things, but at least having like some education in how esports goes, I think that can actually help some students become interested in topics. So if you're taking like esports business, maybe you realize you just like business in general, right? And then
yeah,
so you major in business, but you got your foot in the door because you had this idea of being a finance manager for an esports team or something like this, right? So I think that there's always that crossover that can be very helpful for students. But I'm not quite sure how the programming will happen. But right now, I'm seeing more and more teams kind of get involved in that space. I'm a little concerned because a lot of university teams seem to be subsidized by their football teams. And after sometimes, the sports programs might say, okay, but this is not making us any money or any return on investment. So I'm a little concerned that it'll kind of become a bubble like a lot of the other um, things in esports. But for now, this is kind of the progress that's being made, and I think there's a lot of logic behind it. Just because teams should teams I think should be involved in these things, but having control over them not always the best. So yeah.
Um, I guess I was searching here that like coming back some topics,
Mhm.
uh, back into League of Legends. So I
Yeah.
guess you were talking with Carlos Antunes. He's the new League of Legends esports director in America.
Okay.
So what do you? I don't know how much you do know about CBLOL and like Brazil
Yeah,
in League of
a little
Legends,
bit, but
but yeah, I would
I will not call myself an expert, but I do like occasionally watch it and have talked to a lot of coaches and stuff in the scene. So yeah.
yeah, I actually would ask you what do
Hmm.
you know about CBLOL and what do you
Sure.
think about other League of Legends versions?
So I think CBLOL is always interesting to me because of how passionate and the fans are. Like there's a very big fan base for CBLOL, and it's a great example that I think North American esports productions can kind of learn from because while CBLOL teams don't always do exceptionally at international events, their fan base still
Never. It's
really
okay. It's
they
okay to
still
tell.
they still really love their teams, right, and their
Yeah.
players, and they still root for them like so passionately, right? And that's something that I think um, North American fans don't really understand, or they don't do very well. And that, like, kind of, it's the role of the broadcast, I think, to try to get fans more excited to support their players regardless, right? And that's something that I really wish we could learn from, like, the CBLOL broadcast and the CBLOL scene. And obviously, it's a bit difficult because I don't know. I would say we're being from the US, like nationalism is not always in vogue for us. So we don't always it's very American to say we hate our country, which is very strange. But it's we also had a lot of teams for a very long time focus very hard on winning and doing well internationally. And I think this is something that I have spoken a lot with to my colleagues is we don't always know how to build a brand, right? Because if you have 10 teams in a league who are all saying their goal is to win the league, then 9 teams will not accomplish their goal, and they will have no other way to sell themselves, right? Or no other way to get fans, or no other way to do these things. So that's something that I think I've always admired about the CB Law, because their productions, when I watch them, they're always so exciting. They're always trying something new. Like listening, one thing that I think is not always great, but for coaching staffs and teams, but it's always fun for fans, is they do have audio. They used to have audio for a bit. I don't know if they still do on like the draft and things like this, which is very fun. Or they'll have like very well produced things, like their stadiums always seem so large, and they have these light shows and everything that's so fantastic. So for me, that's always something that I really admire and like about the CBLO. Um, Otherwise, you know, there are some like very fun coaches who I've known for a long time who have worked very hard and um, like who are always trying to improve their teams. So there's like a lot of just excitement around the region, and that's kind of most of the impression that I have of it. So
I will just complete the question.
yeah.
What do you think about that, for example, North American could learn from Brazil and
Hmm.
in the opposite, like what we could learn from North American or make like a, because I
Sure.
don't follow
Yeah.
so much League of Legends, but I don't know, but if I'm not crazy, like Asia is like dominating the
Yeah. Yeah.
world
Of course. Yeah.
championship. How could we improve our games and broadcast, like learning from US and US learning from Brazil to compete against Asia?
Yeah, I think that's so. There's been a lot of people who have kicked around the idea of, just combining the regions into like an Americas region. To me, financially, it does not make sense for CB Law to combine with us, but I would think CB Law would say no, like we're doing great on our viewership and everything else. We don't need to combine with you. But you could have some interesting like teams or interactions that would be fun to follow if something like that happened. In terms of like basically what the broadcast or what the teams can learn. I think that we do end up having like, I mean, there's some interesting things about how we use data and things like this that in the US that I think we've invested a lot of time and energy into, that I think we don't see as much even in like Europe or like China, because that's a region I'm more familiar with. So it would be interesting to kind of see that develop and grow in more regions. I'm not familiar with how developed it is in CB Law, but from my knowledge, there's like less attention paid to data. So maybe that is something that could help develop the scene there. So yeah.
Like you went, you worked in so many roles. Like,
Yeah.
um, what tips do you have for people who want to start a career as a coach? Like right now, I don't know, I'm a teenager, and I do love sports, but I don't know how to start. And as we were talking, like these educational programs, shutting down. Like how, where I begin.
So the route that I always took, or that I've always been recommended to me, is to do content, right, about the pro scene. So if you feel like you have something to add, or you could be a good coach for various reasons, I would say like make videos or something like this. And then if you get any kind of attention, then quite honestly, the easiest way to get hired as a coach is to have the appearance of being smart about the game on social media. So it's not, I don't think it's a great hiring mechanism, which is why when I was in the head coaching staff position, I always liked doing open interviews. I ended up meeting, I guess, Resvan, who was our head coach, through like an open call interview, and he's not someone I would have even known existed, right? So I always like doing those because then you get a better idea of a person's knowledge and a person's ability to handle social situations. Whereas social media, just appearing to have good content and have good knowledge, doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a good coach, right? And I think that a lot of big content creators are very motivated to say if you don't have content you'll be a bad coach, because obviously they do content, right? So it's good for them if if being a good content creator makes you a good coach. So I think that that's one thing that I would say it gets your foot in the door and gets you hired, right, is making content. If you want to actually be a good coach, I would say spend a lot of time reading books about coaching, kind of studying. Be a social person. Like go out and talk to your friends. Like try to make connections. Talk to pro players. Like if you're making content and you're visible, then you might be able to talk to some pro players in DMs and just ask them what they think about items or what they think about the game. Um, and then kind of get your name out there that way. So I think that basically the key to getting almost any job in esports is to be a public figure in some way. So you both doing a podcast, it's a good way forward. So yeah.
Thank you. Another question from Tatiana. She asked, like, in your opinion, what's the biggest problem when Brazil goes to the World Championship?
Oh, that one's tricky because I mean I don't actually I can't say that I'm knowledgeable enough to say like why CBLOL teams don't necessarily perform well internationally. So it's very difficult for me to say that. But in terms of just like their gameplay fundamentals, I would say they struggle a lot with kind of mid-game team coordination, and I think sometimes they struggle a lot with solo laning. It really depends on the team, right? What their strengths and weaknesses are. But those are generally the things that I notice the most. Like I see they'll focus their bot laning in the past couple of international events has been pretty decent, I think, and they've had like decent junglers attend as well. So just like initial early game laning and some of their mid game problems for the past couple of teams that have attended. I'm sure over time you'll see different teams with different problems, but I also don't know like the fundamental issues that are causing Brazilian teams to not perform that well. So hard to say.
We do not know.
No, in my opinion, I say that because of Dota. Uh, for example, we start to play better when we start to play against the best
The
ones,
better
you know?
teams,
Yes,
yeah.
the better teams.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I think it's hard for North American and South American. You are in like a bubble that you are playing against just us.
Yeah.
So you have to play like the better ones to learn from them, like to
Yeah.
learn, you know.
I mean, I know in like North America, our server is just bad, right?
Yeah,
And my understanding, I've never watched a lot of Brazilian server play, is that
yeah,
from talking to players who've played on both, so like a lot of CBLOL players who will play on the NA server, this the Brazilian server is even worse.
yeah,
I think for us, our server population is very small, so I don't know
Mm,
if that's a thing for you, because I heard there's actually a pretty large server population in
yeah,
Brazil.
yeah.
But like if your server is bad, then the fundamentals that you learn from the game,
yeah,
it's you're starting from a place that's very far back from
Mm,
a lot of regions. And when you're in Korea and your server is like so high quality, right? A lot of players
mm,
go to Korea and they will say, you know, not just low ping, but people know fundamentals of macro at very low
mm,
levels. People can play like matchups better. You will learn more just by like
mm,
what people tend to do, which is mindlessly playing solo queue. You will actually
mm,
get better feedback just by playing a lot of games. Whereas here, for in North America at least, you have to not just play games, but watch people playing games in other regions, try to learn and visualize what the correct move is, because you're probably
mm,
playing against someone who doesn't know how to punish you, someone who won't make the right play. So it's hard to learn, just like playing a lot of games. So you have
mm,
to watch VODs, you have to talk to other people to understand how things are going to be played out. You have to kind of abuse your brain and mentally visualize the correct play while you're playing.
mm,
So it's very different way of learning
mm,
that makes it a bit more challenging to improve quickly without good players to play against.
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah, like the Brazilian server is actually huge, but I don't think
Yeah,
people study. I don't know
yeah. I don't.
exactly
That's
what
why I said
happened.
I'm not quite sure what
Yeah,
the
I
fundamental reasoning is, but
I
yeah,
think
but
the
top
biggest problem
players,
is
yeah.
toxicity. It's because it's
But
toxic.
I don't know,
okay,
'cause
I don't know.
people say the Korean server is actually very toxic, but they're good.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
very different. Like I really think
Yep.
the fundamentals in Brazil, I don't know, they're lost. And pro players just say that the solo queue level is actually very bad
I've
here.
also heard there's some like the internet quality is inconsistent depending on where you are, right?
Mm,
Whereas you
like,
actually look at internet quality globally, and
mm,
there's will be a high percentage of good players in places where there's really high internet quality. So like South Korea,
yeah.
Denmark is one. A lot of people say in Europe,
Mm,
why are so many Danish players going pro? But
mhm.
they have like top 10 internet quality globally. So there's actually like
Maybe.
a little bit of that, but I don't know. I don't know what.
But yeah, South Korea is actually a very small country, and Brazil
Yes.
is huge.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm.
let me ask, like, what the medium ping
Sure.
in yeah at the NA server,
So
like
what's you mean like
the
what's the
medium ping?
median?
Yeah,
Okay.
to you.
For in LA, if you're a pro
Yeah.
player, so the server is actually located in Chicago.
Um.
And then we play on the LA server for pro games. So we'll have
Mm,
zero ping in our pro matches, but on the
mm,
solo queue, we'll have like 50 to 70 ping
yeah.
for the pro players. So yeah, that's, I mean, if you go to Europe, I remember working with H2K in Germany, and when our ping was like over 30, the players would say it was unplayable,
Mhm.
you know? So there's,
Uh.
there's that problem to an extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in Brazil, I think it's very similar. Like
Hmm.
pro players they live in São Paulo, where is the
Hmm.
server, and they do play like it's 10 to 17 thing.
Mm.
So it's not that different, but like saying about the country itself,
Yeah.
it like people go
Yeah.
to 30, ping.
Yep.
Um,
And when you have very high ping, it's hard to
mm,
like play on the edge of your capabilities, right? It's
mm,
because you have to account for, like, this is why I always say that there's a high percentage of like mage players
mhm,
in NA, is because you can't play the assassins who have to like go on like a millisecond to timing to
mhm,
get a kill and get
mhm.
out. right? You
mm,
basically are just playing at range, you're
mm,
clearing your wave, and you're playing like much more slow paced game as a mage player. So
mm,
it's easier to climb if your ping is high, right? That's like one thing that
mm,
does actually matter quite a bit. And then
mhm,
of course we get into the Champions Queue conversation, and everyone talks about how NA players are lazy, but it's whatever, you know. It's
mhm.
it's a separate can of
Mm.
worms. Yeah.
Uh, I have like a kind of personal question, but
Hmm.
do you think there were, I don't know, more challenges or different challenges being a female coach?
Hmm. I would say different is
Mm,
accurate. It really depends on who you talk to, because I've spoken to. I think I've been very lucky because I feel like it's never really been an obstacle for players to trust me in my career. But other women will tell me like terrible horror stories about being hit on by players or anything else. So I always say that I might be lucky because I'm old. So so, so it's a bit no one really kind of thinks of me from that perspective. So it's nice. But the I think that like other women staff members have definitely had a lot of challenges. And I won't say that there's been like no sexism in kind of my history, because I think to an extent it was very easy for me to go along with like a lot of things like men said about how women can succeed or not. And uh, that was, I would say that like there were some difficulties. Like I had an owner on one team who said that I couldn't use the bathroom on the same floor as the players, which was very bizarre as well. So there's been a few things that I think have been an impediment. A lot of teams will say that they think it's too risky to have women in a gaming house, which is kind of a very sexist mentality, because again I think it's not just sexist against women, but it's like offensive to men to say, you know, they cannot control themselves, they won't be able to focus if there's like someone with breast around or whatever, you know. So it's a little bit rude on both sides. So there have been a lot of those challenges, but I will also say, like, to an extent, there are some benefits, because I would say it's a lot easier to command respect as like a mother figure than a father figure, because the father figure like is expected to be more stern and more strict. So like if you have players who kind of expect you to be a bit more lenient or understanding and won't lose respect for you for that, then sometimes that can be a benefit as well. Yeah.
Uh, I imagine it's kind of the same in Brazil. It's like,
Hmm.
yes, unfortunately. Okay, I will do a question.
Yep.
Tatiana didn't ask me, but I will ask for you. There is any kind of app or program that you use to help in your career, like to coaching? Do you have any
App
kind?
or program?
App program.
Um, I would say mm, Excel or Google Sheets, very useful. When I first started out, I had access to Stata, which is a program I used a lot in college for research and things like this, and in my previous jobs. R also works a lot if you're managing a lot of data, so that's like more for an analyst role. I think one thing that's a little bit underrated is like project management software, which is something that I used for my teams, because if there's a lot of things to do, it's easy to forget, or it's easy for your co-coaches to forget. So I've used like project management software like Trello or Asana to manage coaching staffs before. So that's been very useful to me. In terms of other stuff, not particularly. I guess just like self checklists and scheduling for myself. Things that help with that are always nice, because it is a big time management issue in esports for sure.
Nice. Another thing just before, yellow. Tatiana said like if you want a volunteer job, she is here
Mhm.
to learn from you.
Okay, okay. I mean, I'm always usually available to talk about stuff. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, Discord, LinkedIn, whatever, and, if you have questions. So yeah.
yeah, like I'm curious about the female leagues. in United
Mhm.
States?
Yeah.
Like, there is any? How it is?
I
Like,
would say there. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
oh
I didn't
no,
realize you
no,
weren't done.
I was just saying that like right now we have the Valorant League that it's like
Yeah.
global, the female league, but the League of Legends, um,
Yeah.
actually we do have a female league that started like last year
Yeah.
by Riot, but I don't
Mhm.
know how it is like internationally.
So I'd say that Europe has a very big female scene, or like a for women, but that's like more organic, kind of like the ERLs that is started as more of a third party thing. In NA, Riot has started doing like game changers, which initially started as more as like educational programming. So I volunteered for that the 2 years before, and basically a lot of that was okay. These are careers. This is what it's like to play on a team. These types of seminars and things, and then giving them some scrims with LCS coaches. The Though this past year, I think it was bigger than ever, which was they had like a month long league where the players all applied, and then when they applied, they were able to join if they were approved. They could join teams, and you could apply as a player or as a coach or as a manager. And so and there was even like some analysts, right? So that was something that was very rewarding to watch and follow because it was a continuously broadcasted league. It also allowed opportunities for like broadcast talent as well. So you had like for example, I mentioned Camcom before, who was part of the EG high school camps. They managed to do some casting for that. And then you had a lot of and then their finals for that all was in the Riot studio in LA. So they flew them all out to LA. All of the teams got to play for the so they had like the semifinals before, and then the finals the next day based on like every and then they had like Emily Rand hosting the desk for that and all of those things. So it was very fun to watch that broadcast. Yeah,
But was that for League of Legends?
yeah, that was for League of Legends.
Oh,
So that was basically new last year. It being
um,
that big, but it started with like a
mhm,
small kind of closed doors program from the previous
mm.
2 years. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's cool to make that more public. Yeah.
I didn't know. But right
Mhm.
now, any big thing like the with tier one has a female team in United States or no?
No,
No.
not for League. Some teams
Mm,
will have Valorant teams, right?
no.
So, but
Yeah,
but for League, no. Yeah.
yeah, Valorant right now we do have like the
Hmm.
international championship, but I we will see a League of Legends, the
Hmm.
female League of Legends championship in the next years.
We'll see. We'll see. It would be nice. I know, like I said, the European scene has very big
Mm,
like.
mm,
I have a friend who is an agent, and he actually represents quite a few women who compete in
mm,
the European female scene. So like
mm,
they get like monetary offers, contracts, and they compete pretty much year round. So that's very exciting.
mm,
Um, so there is that in Europe, but I would say that in NA we're probably
mm,
one of the scenes that are the most behind in terms of developing a league scene for
mm,
women and like other marginalized genders. So yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Like in Brazil, we have this scenario that big teams are starting to invest in the
Hmm.
female league, but it's very new. Like the female league, officially, like with riots and started last year, but was very similar to Europe. Like it was more third parties
Yeah.
champions and yeah, and etc. But yeah, that's it.
Sounds very fun. So yeah.
Unfortunately, we are going to the last part. It's like five
Mm,
Okay.
more minutes. I have one question to finish that. Uh, because like I did this part when I was younger, like in 2011, and I know that
Hmm.
it has been changing so much. For you, what is the process for you building well, a successful team in League of Legends?
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, being sure that our scouting system was very strong was a big priority for me on every team we were at, and I think that the results are evident. Like every org I've been on has, like the after I've left, they've kind of gone on to win a championship. So, Water Thieves, EG. So basically, you have to have like very specific metrics that you use internally to measure types of gameplay. So even in mechanics, you have to break it down to like speed, or in terms of like speed being like how fast they react to situations, or like the way that they're basically it is effectively reaction time, but also just understanding like are they using the correct spells, things like this. And then you go into a broader thing of like how are they visualizing fights and breaking it down from that perspective, like where they should they be positioning, right? All of these elements, and then also you should systemize to an extent like the interview process. So ask a bunch of questions geared to this category. Make sure you're asking the consistent questions so that you can measure the answers against each other, and then constantly be doing that. But you should also be mindful of like what type of player you're looking for in each role. So let's say that you have a really great mid laner that you want to build around, like we did at the end of spring, and we know that the mid laner brings a certain number of qualities. So what qualities do we want to make sure we're complementing that, and not just get like the best mechanical players, because those teams will always, or the most experienced players, because those teams will always crash and burn. So really understanding like the balance of those things and making sure your system is rigorous. I always make sure I watch like at least 10 games of a player that I'm thinking of hiring, to make sure that I really understand kind of comprehensively what this player looks like, uh, and watching those games in detail with a focus on that player. So being thorough, I think if you're thorough, you're probably going to build way better teams than people who are not thorough. And I think that kind of shows through like my track record, and just in general, if you ask how much work people have put into their roster building, you can kind of have a predictor for how easily they'll succeed. So
Just to complete the question, one second. I will do a funny question. Do you watch some CBLOL?
a little bit, usually towards the end. What I liked to do in the past is leading up to worlds or international events, is I like to do content on like all the teams. So I will do videos on, that's when I will watch like the most. But I don't watch it regularly. I know, like for example, Emily Rand, she loves CBLOL. She'll watch like all the time. So,
I, I
but that's it. Yeah.
I would ask about CBLOL, but if you don't know, you can do about North American. If
Hmm.
you have to do a dream team from CBLOL, you can say someone who stopped to play, or if you someone who is playing, which one is your dream team from Brazil? Do you know five
Sorry,
players?
can you explain my what team? Sorry.
Yes, no. If you have to make a dream team from Brazil, like
Oh, dream team. Okay, okay,
yes,
okay,
which
okay.
players you do choose? Do you
Then yeah,
know?
that one is hard, but I think because I'm not, my CBLOL knowledge is not good enough to probably do that one, but I can
Okay,
try LCS, right?
okay, US.
Um, yeah, I think very easy to say Jojo,
Yo.
because he is the MVP of the league, and he was our MVP in summer, and we did very well with him. So for, I assume for team players like actively playing, you're asking.
No, it can be someone that he played, but he's not playing anymore.
Okay, okay. So just kind of like a great, build a great team from those. So like I think Jojo Pion is very obvious. For I always liked Jojo and Contracts together. I think they worked very well together, and Contracts was like one of the best junglers in NA at the time. So Contracts is probably on the list. And then I think for bot lane, we have, like I think 6A brings a lot of consistency and reliable pressure. And then support, you have a lot like Vulcan works very well with engages. So, and he has the pre-established synergy with Jojo. And then top lane, you can go like um, almost anyone. There's so many options. I think if we're continuing the idea of of like all of the. I will just say, just because top lane is a very difficult role to choose, I will just go back and I will say, like Surdy, because we were supposed to start Surdy in EG in 2024, and you got to give the man a shout out. He's a great guy. I think he definitely deserves a shot, and he'll that with Jojo Stixay, Vulcan, and Surdy, we'd have like three great laners in NA, and we could play a team like around that kind of pressure. So that would be kind of like I think that would be a very fun team to work with, and that team would work very well together. So yeah.
Nice.
And well, now I'm curious, like, and the
Mhm.
dream team, like, from all times, from any country,
Yeah.
any league.
Oh, sure, sure. All time, any country. I mean, I gotta give a shout out to my boy Wei Xiao. So he was like one of the main reasons why I became very interested in League of Legends. Obviously, he retired at the end of 2014, so it's a bit of a throwback. Top lane. Let's see. Who's my favorite top laner was probably to watch was probably either Someday or Zoom. And Someday, I know Someday is great to work with, and he'll play whatever. So let's give a shout out to my boy Someday, one of the greatest top laners to touch the game, even if people don't necessarily think of him that way because he plays in NA. And then jungle will say like Dandy is probably my favorite jungler ever. And now and I know like Someday will play like kind of the looper role where he doesn't really require anything. So and we can play around bot lane with Wei Xiao, and that's something that Dandy always did. May as well go with like I mean Mata's great support for that team. Bring back the Dandy Mata duo. Mid lane, let's see. Mid lane's hard one. I mean, Faker is the easy answer, but if you want, if you can't take the easy answer, who would go well on that team? You need kind of someone flexible, someone who will play well, someone like I would have loved to see play more games. It's very difficult. I mean, I'll just take the cop out answer then. Faker it is, but you can't compare any mid laner to him. So we'll just do that.
We are going to the ending, but I do have um one, not the last question. Marcelo will do the last question, but
Mhm.
I really want to know. I don't know, what was the biggest experience that you had with esports? Like, what moment most marked your career?
Um, I would say like early on, the biggest experience for me was when I took a trip. Like the first big experience for me was when I
Mm,
took a trip to Shanghai in 2015 and met
mm,
a lot of the LPL teams and players. That was
mm,
one of the most exciting moments for me early on. I think in terms of all time in my career, I think probably the most exciting moment was being able to probably like producing the Proving Grounds finals in 2022. Those were like very exciting for me because I mean it was just a labor of love, and being able to see like those players manage to find jobs in LCS, like that's the stuff that I'm most passionate about and most excited about is giving players the opportunity to advance in their careers, right? So that's probably like the thing that was most exciting for me is like making those finals and then seeing so many of the players on that team play for LCS, and then two of them even who won the back-to-back finals in 2022 played on my team. So I was very excited to see that happen. So for sure, that's a big moment for me. So yeah.
Nice. And the last question is not from us, it's from Letty, is our co-host, but she doesn't speak English very well, so she asked me to do that. Uh, if you had to do one golden tip, like one golden
One golden
advice,
tip. Okay.
yes, for someone who wants to start in esports career, which one is that tip?
Oh, um, never feel like you're imposing on someone. If there is someone that you want to get advice from, or meet, or learn from, don't be afraid to reach out to them. Don't feel like you're imposing on them. Networking is very important, and if you care a lot and really respect this person, then you will for sure ask um, detailed questions or important questions that are not wasting their time. So if it's someone you really respect and admire, never feel like you're imposing if you want to reach out to them and ask for advice. So that's probably my biggest tip for anyone who wants to get their foot in the door.
Nice.
So, Kelsey, how anyone can hate to reach you? How?
Yeah. So I'm KARONMOSER is usually where you can find me on Twitch, on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. It's probably the easiest place to find me. I have open DMs. You don't have to. I don't have to follow you or anything for you to DM me on Twitter. So feel free to do that. And then of course, I mean, I think my email is also public. It's the same KARONMOSER@gmail.com, but I probably respond to that less. So there you go. That's the easiest way to reach out to me. So yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Kelsey. Thank you really,
Thank you.
really, really much. And guys, thank you very much to watch. And see you next Saturday. Saturday, sorry. Next
Thursday.
Thursday. Sorry. Understand
It's fine. It's
Bye
okay.
bye.
It's all the same to me.
Yeah, bye.